Welcome to the news and Magic Breaks now. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Faye D'Souza. Let's take a look at the headlines today. SEBI makes it easier for real estate companies to raise money through REITs or real estate investment trust. The altered norms allow REITs to invest up to 20% of its corpus in under construction projects. But will this save India's real estate industry? Karnataka defies the Supreme Court order. The Legislative Council passes a unanimous resolution not to release water for any purpose apart from providing it for the basic concerns of Bangalore city and the Kaveri Basin. Is the state headed towards a constitutional crisis? And the war of water escalates. Tamil Nadu now files an objection in the Supreme Court accusing Karnataka of not releasing water and contempt of court. And for citizens of Mumbai, the city will stay on high alert throughout the weekend. The police have beefed up security after school children in Uran reported sighting unidentified masked men with backpacks on Thursday morning. Multi-agency search is on. The police have released the first sketch of the suspects. In the meantime, police advisory is avoid crowded spaces. Pothole nightmares continue in Mumbai. Citizens struggle for over 2 hours in the meantime to get his leg pulled out of a pothole. Mumbai's BST buses slam the brakes and say repair roads or we will suspend all services. But it's the lifeline that the real estate industry has been waiting for over 2 years. The big push and the final clarity list coming in from SEBI on REITs or real estate investment trusts. The altered norms will give more flexibility to investors and make it easier for them to raise money for real estate. Listen to SEBI Chief UK Sinha and what he said about the changes.
The board has approved, for example, a two-stage SPV, so an SPV and holding company with a lot of safeguards so that it is not misused. So we have been very careful in providing the safeguards. And also the mandatory holding by the sponsors, which was 25% earlier, that has been reduced to 15%. This is in keeping with the demand from the market and extensive consultation that we had. I am also happy to report to you that 3 InvITs have already been registered and one of them has also filed their scheme. And I will not like to name that particular one, but the amount involved is?
Almost 5,000.
Almost 5,000 crores. So one request has already been filed. 3 other requests have been filed for registration of InvITs. They are at various stages of examination.
Well, obviously, industry has been waiting for that announcement for a very long time. Joining me in the studio right now, Sunil Rokhli, MD and CEO of ASK Group, a focused fund that invests in real estate. Also on the phone, Om Ahuja and Kuldeep Chawla. Sunil, straight up question. Do we now have all of the clarity we need on REITs? Do you actually expect now REITs before maybe the beginning of next year?
I think a lot of clarity has come in last 2 years about how to handle the exit for those asset owners and the way internationally these assets do get registered as a REIT.
Yes.
And that really expands the horizon for investors to invest into an income-yielding assets. To my mind, this step of SEBI today really reached to a stage where I don't think we have any more complaints really not to do a REIT. So I expect...
Okay, so if you have no more complaints not to do a REIT, then is ASK looking at doing a REIT soon enough?
Yeah, I think ASK has all the time focused more on residential focused private equity in last 8 years. And I think in the current situation, having most of the clarity of how to handle REIT, what taxation would be around, and what would be the exit route for the REIT, the income yielding asset holders, I think we definitely would be exploring a possibility of the commercial assets investments leading to REITs.
Well, Sunil, I want you to react to this. We were just listening to the response of Mr. UK Sinha. He said a lot of safeguards have very carefully been put because we don't want anything to be misused. We've been extremely careful about safeguards, which sort of in some way indicates the tone the government has been taking with the real estate industry, in the central government and with regulation of late, that there is a need to safeguard, there is a need to sort of make watertight regulations. Has that been done here in the REITs case from the point of view of global investors and investors like yourself? Is it watertight? Are you safe enough?
See, I'll tell you, first and foremost, safety leads to non-starters. Okay, so I think the fundamental question here is that the ease of doing real estate business in the current situation, given the local nature of approvals and the government agencies getting involved, is not easy at all. The first time, at least I feel, the income-yielding assets, the steps taken by SEBI are towards the ease of doing business in real estate as far as the income-yielding assets are concerned. So there would be risk associated, because without risk, one cannot generate returns. But as far as possible, the conflict of interest, the alignment of various stakeholders, and giving them a flexibility in terms of size, bringing more sponsors, giving the opportunity to have instead of 10%, 20% into under construction properties, should make it attractive for the people to really come forward and do REITs and expand the market. So
when can we expect a REITs from your company, from ASK?
No, I really can't comment on the REIT, but definitely we would do entry into commercial real estate this financial year.
All right. I also have Kuldeep Chawla, Om Ahuja on the phone line. Om, for a company like yours, you're with Brigade in Bangalore. Is this the lifeline that you've been waiting for a while? Because now this means that a lot of the holdings can be REITed out. You can raise funds to plow into new projects?
Well, Faye, I would not say it's a lifeline. It is primarily a route for raising capital. You can actually put more capital to better use in terms of yield for a company like ours, which is a listed company. But yes, this gives a very positive signal in terms of there is government and the regulator really working hard to make more avenues, create more cash flows into the system. And giving this confidence is very important when you see commercial real estate has really taken off. You have shortage in the commercial space in the country, where it becomes really challenging that you don't have space to offer to sell or maybe lease. So that cycle and this entry point makes it a win-win situation for industry as well as consumer as well as a investor.
What are Brigade Group's plans, Om, on REITs? Is that something you're considering?
Well, at this point of time, the process of creating the environment has started, where you basically have an SPV model where you bring in an asset, income-yielding asset, into a SPV process. And that is somewhere you look at long-term or medium-term to create that vehicle to raise money, which can be reutilized for doing more business in this bank.
All right. Amit Goenka, Managing Director, CEO of Nisys Finance, joins us as well. Amit, there was a report not long ago about your company as well considering a REIT. Does this give you the clarity that you need? What happens from here? How long can we expect? How long before we can expect a REIT from you?
Well, first and foremost, I think this is very important because clearly the total asset size available across developers is not large enough to qualify for the minimum asset management requirement under the former REIT regulation. So increasing the number of sponsors clearly helps, where one can now aggregate a larger number of developer assets to manage a REIT. So I think certainly that's a step in the right direction. Secondly, the requirement for promoter holdings to be reduced from 25% to 15% again is important, because one of the major reasons for these developer partners to come forth is to actually seek liquidity and not get caught up for the infinitely long term with these investments, because this is a liquidity event for them. So I think that's another thing which is very helpful. I think third and foremost, the most helpful thing is really the need for the 75% majority approval, because that we've seen as a major bottleneck, not just for REITs, but for even other fund formats, whether it's AIF or others, where there are requirements for a manager intervention which cannot be foreseen, and therefore SEBI allowing the manager to actually take a call on behalf of majority investors is again another very, very good sort of move in the right direction. Having said that, whether we are in a rush to go out and get a REIT done, not really, because there are a number of big boys which have been eyeing the REIT market. There have been a number of news articles, and apart from the 3 InvIT applicants, there have been a few other movements, and we'd wait and watch to see how the big boys list and fare before some of the smaller or medium-sized developers, through us or along with us, actually come to the market and actually go for a REIT listing. So clearly, I think it's the first. We're not going to be the first mover in this space.
Sunil, enough has been said about how much money we're expected to raise as a country through REITs. In fact, the SEBI chairman also mentioned one number. He said we have one application for about 5,000 crore rupees, a huge amount. From the point of view of the fact that we know the real estate industry right now, the biggest challenge is raising funds. Is this then that solution, at least for maybe the top 20% of the industry that has been grappling with this? Will REITs offer that solution at this point?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing what REITs are going to do to the industry is that all these A-grade office buildings are built on the balance sheet strength by the developers, and maybe then discounted the receivables with the banks and probably have. But they have not really been party to any kind of capital appreciation to be encashed, or the liquidity of that asset to be used for the current highly leveraged balance sheet.
Yes.
So I think the fundamental story what this REITs regime is going to do is that depending on the balance sheet requirement of a developer, and encashing and monetizing some of these assets through a REIT is definitely one of the very important thing. And let's understand that this is accumulated a decade over assets are getting monetized. Now they would be requiring liquidity to even to look at new assets in the similar category. So what would happen is that some of these large 20% of the market, or maybe even less than that, those guys would be specialized in income yielding assets, be it office space, be it hospitality part of it, or it is a retail part of it. So I think that process last 5 years virtually stalled, because there's no balance sheet capacity left anymore to really hold on to an asset which is income yielding. I think the REIT definitely would create liquidity, and that is a very important step for the developer to deliver the balance sheet, the new supply on office buildings and the other income yielding assets.
Especially since we're considering right now the ask on return of any sort of funding for real estate for construction at this point is really, really high. Srini, the fund you look at yourself, even the expectations of returns from funds right now is very high. This sort of liquidity coming in for real estate developers is actually a sigh of relief. They'll be able to raise liquidity without the exorbitant, ROI expectations.
No, I think we have to differentiate this part, and that is the misleading part of the whole real estate industry. It's completely misleading to say that if you are investing into real estate, you should get very high returns, because perceived risk in the real estate is always very high. And it's a fact that doing real estate business in this country is not easy at all compared to any other industry, automobile, software, pharmaceutical industry. I think real estate is the most complicated, most risky, and that's where expectations are very high. But REIT, one need to understand that what is the kind of risk associated. So it is a debt instrument within the real estate spectrum, which was non-existent in the past.
Right.
So far, all the money which has gone into real estate is equity money, which is early stage investments and keeping through the cycle of the project, and the second kind of money, which is mezzanine and the banking or NBFC money, which is a high yielding money. But this REIT as a regime is definitely way away from that thinking of expecting extremely high returns. This is
my point is, for any real estate developer who's able to raise funds by REITing out some of the assets that he's holding, it will allow him cash flow at this point where he doesn't have to provide those high returns to either his lenders or his equity investors.
No, I think this particular market would decide the REIT pricing. Correct. So the yields are not going to be decided by a developer anymore. I think a good quality office buildings, very well structured, and what you are left on the table while you are listing the REIT would decide the success of the REIT. So it is not going to be really a control of a developer to decide. I think the successful, as we see the successful IPOs and not so successful IPOs. So similarly, the REITs would be successful if the investors, which are retail as well as the institutional, they would look at this closely. What is the trade-off they are making in this?
All right. Amit, there are, like Sunil pointed out, maybe less than 20% of the industry that's really attractive at this point to everyone, whether it is lender, equity investor, private equity investors. Everybody's focusing on a group of alphas really that have managed to hold on to strong balance sheets given everything that's happened in the market over the last couple of years. Are these also the companies that will benefit largely from REITs? What's on that checklist for someone like you?
Well, first of all, the availability of capital for commercial real estate has been really non-existent apart from, let's say, lease rental discounting product or a CMBS like the ones that DLF did, or effectively even exiting these assets at some point in time. Even exits have not been very easy, barring the last maybe couple of years when some big boys have come in and very cherry-picked some of the top assets in the country. So clearly, for those who have a suite of commercial assets, for them this is a very large liquidity opportunity, which otherwise had to be serviced through LRDs or other bank debt obligations, because REIT capital is now equity capital, so they do have a certain skin in the game for a certain upside that they wish to enjoy for the long term. So they're not effectively giving away the long-term benefits as well, and they also get to obviously enjoy the liquidity without having to pay back that money, which they now be able to raise only through a bank facility. On a bank facility side, again, typically the money being raised is, yes, it's competitive. It's between, let's say, 10-11%. They will obviously get a better return on REITing out their assets, apart from the fact that they'll get more liquidity compared to what the banks have been able to provide against LRD opportunities. So clearly, not just the big boys, but even the medium-scale developers, who've developed maybe 1 million square feet, if not millions of square feet, will have this opportunity to bunch together assets along with other such co-developers and bring their assets to the marketplace, which was really a difficult proposition given the limited number of
which, like
commercial
Sunil
buyers.
said, the market will decide what it likes and what it doesn't like. I want to also bring in Kuldeep Chawla, but first, for our viewers who haven't really understood how a REITs will work, it's like a mutual fund. It's a basket in which a developer is allowed to put in commercial property, and now that commercial property definition will also include hotels and hospitals. Put in that commercial property it's occupied, it's generating an income through rental right now, and then offer that to the market so that investors like you and I can buy and be part of it. The return that you receive will be from the rental that is generated of the assets that you hold. That's simplifying it a great deal, but that's fundamentally how it will work. Kuldeep, what kind of expectations of returns can we have from REITs right now? And also, do you expect the larger market to be excited? Because we know the stock market has used real estate as its favorite whipping boy. So for REITs at least, will the larger market be excited and will we have a lot of takers? What are your expectations?
I think first you'll actually probably see InvITs come in, and then you'll see REITs. I think in concept they're both similar, but I think what SEBI has rightly done is to A, walk the talk, and B, get the letter on the spirit right. So I don't expect, a large number of issuances to happen right now. I think both on InvITs and following that on REITs, you'll see the market get tested with a couple of offerings initially. And then basis that experience, is when you'll see things opening up. But yes, greater GDP growth, buoyancy in markets, inflows from FDI will help the overall sentiment.
Right.
You said something earlier that you and Sun were talking about, and I just wanted to touch on that as well. What it does do is to give developers more equity. And that equity was missing in the market. And that equity, through whether it's the top 15 or 20% is not so relevant, will flow into the market and hopefully, along with other measures, revive the overall broader market. I think that's the big benefit that this has the opportunity to do, which is to unlock the hitherto 5, 7, 10-year capital which has been on the balance sheets of developers and locked up.
All right. In fact, Atul Chauria, the chairman of Panchsheel Realty, joins me right now. Atul, many thanks for joining us on the show. We know that you have a plan for perhaps one of the first REITs to hit the market. How much of good news has this been for you, for SEBI to finally offer us the final piece that was missing in the puzzle, that final piece of clarity? And how quickly now will we see your REIT hit the market?
See, the REIT as a concept was actually started in United States in 1960. So almost 56 years ago, followed by the Europe in 1969 with Netherlands, and it it is a fairly recent phenomenon in Asia with Japan in 2001 and Singapore in 2002. So for the REIT to be successful in India, it is a must that both the Indian retail investors and the domestic institution investors like insurance company, mutual fund understand the concept and product well. As only having foreign institutional investors will not deepen the market. Though the Indian real estate REIT laws are at par with any global REIT markets like Singapore, or maybe I would say it's much better than that also.
Isn't enough depth in the market right now to be able to successfully raise the kind of money for REITs?
See, Singapore introduced REIT regulation in 1999. But it took only in 2001 the tax incentives being provided, it got provided. Capital Land made first attempt to do the REIT in Singapore. However, only 80% of the issue was subscribed and the Capital Land then had to cancel the REIT. The reasons Capital Land had to abort the REIT is issue was too big, lack of investor education, other large IPO hit the market same time. So even in India, the education for the investors have to be there. Plus, the market should take the concept as a yielding asset investment instead of speculative asset investment. So only the time will tell whether the Indian market is ready or not ready.
No, but my question, Atul, is: are you ready with your partner Blackstone? When will we see that REIT come in?
See, we have already started the preparation, but we have not timed it when we're going to hit the market. So, but our preparation is going on.
And what is the size of that REIT that we can expect?
8 cap valuation, it should be upward of or between $3 and $3.2 billion. $3.2
billion. And I think this is, Atul's making some very, very good points, Sunil. The fact that the Indian market is going to need to be educated, because a lot of people are still, not very clear about the fact that it's only construction, it's only commercial, it's not construction finance. This is actually rental yields, which means that the returns expectations, like Atul pointed out, are drastically different, because you're looking at what your rental will give you, plus maybe capital appreciation over a period of time. So it's not construction finance, and that's a need of education that the market is going to need to do. Also, adding hospitals and hotels, Atul, how much of a difference will that make from the point of view of someone who's considering a REIT? How much of a difference will inclusion of hospitals and hotels in the definition of commercial property make to you?
The commercial property, the yielding office assets have at least a proper, you can track the yield. Whereas hospital and hotels will be a spiky yields where you will not be able to track it year on year. But the office market yield, you can track it because the leases are long for 10 years. You can track the returns for 10 years very easily. And it's very, very stable cash flows.
All right, so that's the difference then. And then, of course, Sunil, we know that SEBI has been really hard with regulation on almost everything else. If we consider the average mutual fund as well, the amount of disclosures involved in a mutual fund, sometimes there's information being disclosed that the investor doesn't have any use for. So do we expect also the similar kind of disclosures and the similar kind of regulation for REITs? Because like Atul pointed out, education is going to be really important in the first few years.
I think the REIT regulation, the moment it is getting listed in the stock market, I think any listing guidelines for any company to get listed need to be fulfilled. So I think those are given. I don't see any disconnect in that part. The disconnect probably can get established, and that's where market probably would watch that what kind of quality assets you have put in the REIT. How stable are those rentals, how you have done the valuation of those assets, and what are the valuation guidelines as far as those REITs are concerned. I think it's very important, and that's where the perceptionally people would say that whether this REIT is really going to give them a yield which is risk adjusted, or probably the yields were going to be not sufficient for them to really participate. And I agree with Atul on the point is that in Indian market, we have not seen the income yielding, debt instrument for long period of time. So I feel at this point of time, the first people to move on the REIT as an investor in a REIT is going to be institutions, which probably domestically, I think it's insurance companies, life and general insurance companies. There will be some of the institutions will come in. I think the biggest part of the money is EPFO. The employee pension funds, the national pension fund schemes would need to also look at this particular part, because this is
the EPFO tends to be extremely conservative. So real estate
they have
might
been
not
allowed
be something.
to.
They have been allowed.
They've been allowed 5% in capital market recently. So my sense is that they all the time have invested into government securities. Now, given this asset and given the established track record we would have, or maybe historically track record what you see in the developed market where REITs are existing for a long period of time, I think it is no different. So my sense is the asset, what risk this asset carries is the one which will decide.
I have a very quick question, Sunil, and Atul also. The fact that we are looking at RMZ, Brigade, Prestige, big companies in Bangalore, Atul in Pune, DLF in Delhi, Raheja Corp in Mumbai. What about the rest of the cities? Do we expect any of the joy of REITs to go outside of the cities that I just named? So do you expect any of that money to go anywhere else?
I don't think they would go beyond the cities what you mentioned. Large part of these assets are going to be in these 5 or 6 growth centers. And these are the centers which are fueled by the IT, ITS and services-led industries. If the other markets do get the overflow of this kind of demand, and then there's a supply coming in, but I see it's a little longer horizon, and I don't see that happening in a hurry.
All right, we've run out of time on this show. I want to thank our panel. Atul, many thanks for joining us on the show. Good luck to you with that REITs. We wish you very good luck. Sunil, Amit, thank you very much. Om on the phone there. That's a wrap on this edition of news here on Magic Bricks. Now we'll bring you more updates and headlines right after this break. Don't go anywhere.
You can watch live TV on our website mbnow.in. Find us on Facebook at facebook.com/magicbricksnow. And don't forget to click the like button. You can also follow us on Twitter at Magic Bricks Now. To stay updated with all our programming, hit the subscribe button on our YouTube channel by logging on to youtube.com/magicbricksnow.